At first glance, it looked like a simple photograph. Two teenage girls sitting side by side on a grand plantation veranda in 1853. One white, one black, both smiling, both dressed in lace and silk as if bound by friendship. But when Dr. Michael Hayes zoomed in, his heartbeat quickened. Beneath the black girl's delicate gown, something metallic glimmered, a golden shackle disguised as jewelry. It wasn't an accessory. It was a restraint. What the world had long admired as a symbol of grace and companionship was actually a portrait of captivity. Beauty masking bondage, friendship hiding chains. Dr. Michael Hayes, senior curator at the National Museum of American History, had spent more than 2 decades uncovering the buried truths of America's past. He'd examined portraits that spoke louder than any textbook, from the proud settlers of the 1700s to the haunting images of enslaved men and women who were photographed not as humans, but as property. Yet nothing in his long, meticulous career prepared him for what he discovered inside a plain, dust-covered box marked Montgomery Collection, 1853. At first glance, the collection looked ordinary: family portraits, plantation houses, magnolia gardens, and scenes of southern life frozen in sepia tones. But one photograph stopped him cold. Its faded label read, "Miss Caroline Montgomery and her companion Harriet." It appeared innocent enough. 2 teenage girls seated side by side on a grand plantation veranda, bathed in sunlight. Caroline, the white daughter of the plantation owner, sat tall in a pearl-pinned ivory gown. Beside her sat Harriet, a black girl of about 15, dressed identically, her expression calm but cautious. Their matching clothes suggested closeness, maybe friendship, maybe affection. It was the kind of image meant to comfort the conscience of the antebellum South. The illusion of harmony between enslaved and free. But something about the photograph unsettled Dr. Hayes. Beneath its beauty was a stiffness, an unnatural symmetry that didn't feel human. The smiles were polite but lifeless, so he did what he always did when a picture didn't make sense. He looked closer. Dr. Hayes digitized the image, enhanced the contrast, and magnified the details. Slowly, the illusion began to unravel. There, beneath Harriet's gown, something caught the light, a faint glimmer near her ankle. He adjusted the exposure. The golden shape grew sharper. At first, it looked like jewelry, an ornate anklet, perhaps a symbol of elegance. But as the pixels came into focus, his stomach turned. It wasn't jewelry. It was a restraint, a shackle, a beautifully crafted, gold-plated chain designed to look like decoration. Dr. Hayes sat frozen, staring at the monitor. The photograph that once appeared graceful now felt sinister. The way Harriet's hands rested in her lap, the way Caroline leaned slightly toward her, all of it looked staged. A performance, a lie. The truth was devastatingly clear. Harriet wasn't Caroline's companion by choice. She was enslaved, dressed to mimic her owner's daughter, forced to smile for a camera that captured her submission as elegance. This was no portrait of friendship. It was a photograph of bondage disguised as beauty. A single image, frozen in time, that whispered the truth the world had refused to see for over 170 years. The dim light of Dr. Michael Hayes' office flickered as he leaned closer to the screen. The photograph from 1853 had already unsettled him, but now, as he enhanced the image, something gleamed beneath the folds of the young girl's dress. At first, he thought it was nothing more than an anklet, maybe an expensive piece of jewelry, a token of luxury from a family known for their wealth. The Montgomerys were Southern aristocrats after all. Every detail in their portraits had been meticulously arranged to project charm, refinement, and grace. But as the magnification deepened and the light adjusted across the sepia tones, the truth began to take form. What shimmered beneath the hem of Harriet's gown wasn't ornamental. It was iron, molded, plated, and shaped to deceive the human eye. The so-called golden anklet revealed itself as something far more sinister. A restraint. Dr. Hayes' breath faltered. He froze the frame, studying the faint hinge near Harriet's ankle, the almost invisible line where metal met skin. It wasn't just a decorative cuff. It was a shackle forged with the precision of cruelty and the arrogance of wealth. This wasn't the symbol of elegance the Montgomery family intended to preserve. It was proof of ownership, a gilded prison clasped around a child's flesh. The realization sent a chill through him. For centuries, people had admired this photograph, historians, collectors, even educators, interpreting it as a heartwarming image of Southern harmony. "Miss Caroline Montgomery and her companion Harriet," the caption read. But the truth was far from harmonious. It was violent, hidden behind silk and lace. Harriet's hand, resting gently on Caroline's lap, had once been described as a gesture of affection. But now, Dr. Hayes saw it differently. It was too deliberate, too rehearsed. The fingers were tense, the smile strained, a mask worn under command. This wasn't love. It was obedience. Not warmth, but survival. Dr. Hayes adjusted the exposure once more, and another detail emerged. The faint bruising along Harriet's wrist, barely visible beneath the lace cuff of her sleeve. Even her posture betrayed exhaustion, her shoulders drawn tight, her gaze too still for a child. What once looked like a tender moment between two girls was, in truth, a carefully staged lie. Caroline, radiant in her ivory dress, represented privilege, a daughter born into comfort, protected from consequence. Harriet, in her nearly identical gown, symbolized the illusion that the South so desperately tried to sell. That slavery could be civilized, even beautiful. The Montgomery family hadn't photographed friendship that day. They had photographed control. They had captured a portrait of power disguised as companionship. Dr. Hayes sat back, his stomach tightening. The longer he looked, the more the picture transformed, from elegance to evidence, from beauty to betrayal. That photograph, he realized, wasn't just an artifact. It was a confession, whispered through the years, wrapped in ribbons, buried in smiles. A confession that the world had chosen not to see, until now. Dr. Michael Hayes couldn't stop thinking about the photograph. The haunting stillness of the two girls, one free, one enslaved, lingered in his mind long after he left the archives. The next morning, he returned to the Montgomery collection, determined to uncover who Harriet truly was. The deeper he dug, the darker the truth became. Among the brittle pages of plantation ledgers and the faded ink of personal letters, Dr. Hayes found a pattern, a recurring word that appeared beside the names of young enslaved girls. That word was companion. At first glance, it sounded innocent, warm, even affectionate. But as he read further, the illusion shattered. Companion was never about friendship. It was a mask, a genteel euphemism carefully crafted by the Southern elite to sanitize cruelty and disguise servitude beneath layers of civility. In the 19th century plantation world, young enslaved girls were often assigned to accompany the daughters of their masters. They were chosen for their youth, their quiet obedience, and their appearance, trained to serve as living mirrors of the white girls they followed. They dressed alike, ate together, and appeared inseparable in public. To visiting guests, they looked like playmates or sisters. But behind the smiles and matching ribbons, every detail was orchestrated to reinforce power and ownership. Dr. Hayes found an entry in one of the Montgomery diaries, written in delicate cursive by Caroline's mother, Eliza Montgomery, dated June 18, 1853. It read, "Harriet is her constant companion, gentle, loyal, and adorned with her golden anklet, which I find most pleasing against her complexion." The line chilled him. The golden anklet, the same object he had mistaken for jewelry, wasn't a gift. It was a shackle, a restraint engineered to resemble beauty, so that the family could parade their supposed benevolence before the world while concealing the iron truth of their dominance. That one sentence, written so casually, exposed the heart of an entire system built on deceit. In the Montgomery household, Harriet would have risen before dawn to tend to Caroline's needs, brushing her hair, lacing her corset, arranging her jewelry, and following her throughout the day. Every gesture, every smile, every word had to be measured. Her role was not that of a friend, but of a shadow. Silent, present, invisible in her own right. The word companion existed only to comfort the conscience of the oppressor. It allowed slaveholders to rewrite the narrative, to claim civility while maintaining control. To the world, they could boast of harmony. Inside those grand plantation homes, however, the truth was brutal. Harriet's laughter had to be timed. Her tears had to be hidden. Her very existence was choreographed to uphold a fantasy, the fantasy of a gentle South. Dr. Hayes uncovered more letters, each one layering another thread of deception. In one, Eliza wrote to a neighboring plantation mistress, "Our Caroline has taken quite fondly to her little servant Harriet. She follows her like a sister, and their likeness in dress makes for the sweetest picture. I believe it teaches them both refinement." Refinement, a word that masked violence with the perfume of politeness. That was the story of the antebellum South: cruelty dressed in silk, oppression hidden under etiquette, and human suffering polished into art. The golden anklet that bound Harriet wasn't just metal. It was a symbol of how far the Montgomerys were willing to go to disguise control as compassion. Dr. Hayes read one final line from a Montgomery account book, a notation beside Harriet's name. "Replacement requested if outgrown." He stopped reading. His stomach turned. In those 4 words lay the truth. Harriet was not seen as a girl, not a child deserving care or love. She was property, replaceable, recorded, and priced. The elegant photographs, the lace gowns, the sunlit verandas, all of it was a facade. The companions of the plantation world were children trapped in cages made of etiquette and gold. Dr. Hayes leaned back, the silence of the archive pressing down on him. The Montgomery family had called it elegance, but for Harriet, for countless girls like her, it was nothing short of imprisonment wrapped in ribbons. The photograph was no longer just an image. It had become testimony, proof that even beauty, when wielded by cruelty, could become a cage, a golden one that glittered under the light of history's lies. The discovery of Harriet's photograph was not an isolated revelation. For Dr. Michael Hayes and his team, it became the doorway into a much larger, far darker reality, one that stretched across the entire American South. As they continued their research, hundreds of similar portraits began to surface. From the grand plantations of Virginia to the sugar estates of Louisiana, the same eerie composition repeated itself. Young white girls seated gracefully beside black girls of nearly the same age, both dressed alike in lace, ribbons, and silk. The illusion was always the same: harmony, innocence, sisterhood. But beneath the soft light and genteel postures, something sinister pulsed. When Dr. Hayes and his team enhanced the old glass plate negatives with modern technology, adjusting exposure, sharpening shadows, revealing hidden layers of texture, tiny, horrifying details began to emerge. Metallic glints beneath layers of fabric, clasps that didn't match jewelry designs of the era, indentations around wrists, faint bruises on ankles, and chains partially obscured by folds of lace. What appeared to be decorative bracelets were, in truth, restraints forged to look elegant. The thin ribbons that tied around a girl's wrist were sometimes connected to concealed locks, hidden from sight when the photograph was taken. These girls, enslaved companions, were meticulously staged to appear as beloved equals, yet they lived every second under control. Dr. Hayes called it the theater of oppression. In this performance, everything was scripted. The clothing, the smiles, even the positioning of hands. The enslaved girl's hand was often placed gently on her mistress's lap, a gesture meant to symbolize closeness and devotion. But in truth, it was a silent display of ownership. Every photograph was a carefully arranged illusion, a portrait not of friendship, but of domination dressed in tenderness. As the research expanded, they began to map the practice. In the archives of Charleston, Savannah, and New Orleans, they found the same euphemistic term repeated in ledgers and wills: personal companion. Some plantation families even requested artists to paint portraits of their daughters with their dear companion, describing the enslaved girl as a sweet shadow, loyal and true. But the truth was unbearable. These girls were never allowed to leave their mistress's side, not in public, not even in private. They slept on floors near their beds, rose before dawn to help them dress, and followed them everywhere, like ornaments, like ghosts. Dr. Hayes's assistant, Mariah, found one diary entry from a Louisiana plantation that revealed the cruelty beneath the charm. Clara refuses to go to supper without her companion, Elsie. The child grows restless if Elsie is out of sight. She says they are sisters in soul, though Elsie knows better than to forget her place. That last sentence, though Elsie knows better than to forget her place, encapsulated the entire system. It was psychological warfare disguised as intimacy. Enslaved girls were trained to perform affection, to show gratitude for their enslavement, and to suppress every flicker of resistance. This wasn't merely physical bondage, it was emotional manipulation, a blurring of affection and control so complete that even the victims were forced to act out their captivity as love. The white families, in turn, used these performances to justify their cruelty, convincing themselves and the world that slavery could coexist with kindness. Photographs became propaganda. They told a lie so elegant that it endured for more than a century. And yet, under the scrutiny of modern light, that lie crumbled. Historians began to notice consistent signs. The downward tilt of the enslaved girl's eyes, the stiffness in her smile, the subtle distance despite physical closeness. Behind every painted smile was the terror of punishment, the exhaustion of obedience, the silence of ownership. Dr. Hayes described it as the prettiest form of cruelty ever devised. Across the South, these companions were paraded before guests, introduced as almost family. They were forced to read aloud, serve at meals, and sit through lessons as if they belonged. But they belonged only as property. Their beauty, their grace, even their silence were used to elevate their owner's image. They weren't seen as human beings. They were living ornaments, accessories that breathed, smiled, and suffered, used to humanize the very people who enslaved them. Every photograph, every painted portrait was a mask over a wound, one that history had tried to forget. But with each new image uncovered, Dr. Hayes' team stripped away another layer of deception. What had once been celebrated as elegance and refinement was, in truth, the visual language of domination, a system that turned affection into performance and captivity into art. The photographs didn't just document the past. They exposed the deliberate choreography of control and the horrifying beauty of a lie that had fooled the world for generations. For decades, Harriet existed only in that single haunting image, a frozen moment of obedience and silence. But history, as cruel as it was, could not keep her there forever. When the Civil War erupted in 1861, the South began to unravel. Plantations that once stood as monuments of wealth and power became battlegrounds. Their manicured gardens burned and their grand halls emptied. Amid the chaos, Harriet saw what she had never seen before, a chance. Some said she ran in the dead of night, barefoot through the cypress swamps, her fine dress torn by branches as she fled under a blood-red sky. Others believed she hid inside a wagon bound for Charleston, disguised as a servant, until she reached the docks and stowed away on a northern ship. No record tells exactly how she escaped, only that she did. By the spring of 1864, a woman matching Harriet's description was recorded in the Freedmen's Bureau Registry in Philadelphia. Her name was listed simply as Harriet M. The M, historians later believed, stood for Montgomery. In Philadelphia, she found work as a seamstress. The same hands once forced to dress the daughter of a plantation owner now crafted garments for her own clients, free, precise, and unshackled. Freedom, however, did not erase the past. She carried it with her. In her quiet posture, her distant gaze, and the way her wrists still bore faint marks that never fully faded. Years later, in her old age, Harriet was interviewed by a field researcher from the Federal Writers Project, part of a nationwide effort in the 1930s to collect the stories of formerly enslaved people before they disappeared forever. Sitting in a small parlor in North Philadelphia, wrapped in a gray shawl, she spoke slowly as if lifting memories from deep water. Her voice trembled, but her words cut clear through time. She spoke of the Montgomery plantation, the endless rehearsals, the lessons in how to walk, speak, and smile properly. She remembered the silk dresses she was made to wear, the way they rustled against her skin, hiding the cold metal that circled her ankle. "They said I was her companion," she told the interviewer. But I was never free to go where I pleased. I was her shadow, always behind, always quiet. When asked about the photograph, though she never saw it again, she paused for a long time before answering. "That day," she said softly, "they told me to sit still." Miss Caroline took my hand and smiled. The man with the camera said, "Don't move." I wanted to pull away, but my wrist hurt where the gold band was tight. So I smiled too. That's what they wanted in smiles. Her words revealed what the image could never show. The forced stillness, the rehearsed affection, the terror behind a child's eyes. When they told me to smile, she said, "It wasn't for happiness, it was for silence." Harriet described nights when she would lie awake, the weight of her ankle chain pressing into her skin, imagining what freedom might feel like. She said she sometimes dreamed of walking barefoot in the grass without fear, something so simple, yet so impossible. And when freedom finally came, it wasn't joy that she felt first, it was disbelief. "I didn't know how to walk without looking back," she said. "I didn't know how to sit without asking permission." For years, Harriet avoided photographs altogether. The sight of a camera made her uneasy. It reminded her of that veranda, of the gold shackle gleaming beneath silk, of the world that mistook her pain for poise. But in that same interview, she said something extraordinary, something that would echo through history. "They took my picture to remember their kindness," she said. "Now they can look again and see the truth." Those words became the closing line of Dr. Hayes's exhibition decades later. Harriet lived a long life. She married a free black carpenter named Samuel Turner, had 3 children, and outlived them all. Her small home in North Philadelphia became a meeting place for newly arrived migrants escaping Southern violence. Neighbors said she often helped young women find work, teaching them to sew, to read, to carry themselves with dignity. But she rarely spoke of the plantation or the girl named Caroline. "Some memories," she once said, "ain't meant to stay in the dark, but they don't belong in the light too long either." Harriet died in 1939 at the age of 94. She was buried in an unmarked grave near Germantown, but her story did not end there. Her recorded testimony resurfaced in the archives decades later, and when paired with the rediscovered Montgomery photograph, it completed a circle that had remained broken for more than a century. A picture once meant to glorify wealth and refinement became, through Harriet's words, a mirror reflecting cruelty, deception, and endurance. The world finally saw what she had lived through. The false smiles, the elegant chains, the performance of friendship that masked the reality of bondage. And for the first time in 170 years, the truth no longer hid behind silk and smiles. Harriet had lived to tell her story, and through her voice, history was forced to look again. And this time, it could never look away. Today, the photograph that once hid in darkness, the portrait of Caroline Montgomery and Harriet, hangs under bright museum lights at the Smithsonian's powerful exhibition, Hidden in Plain Sight, Captive Companions. The image, carefully restored, rests in the center of a quiet room surrounded by portraits of America's past. Smiling faces, polished silver frames, lace collars, and delicate hands folded in composure. Visitors often approach expecting another relic of Southern gentility, but within seconds the illusion breaks. At first they admire the composition, the symmetry, the sunlight falling through the veranda columns, the way Caroline's white gown contrasts with Harriet's pale blue dress. Looks serene, almost angelic, but then they notice the small detail that changes everything. The faint glint beneath Harriet's skirt, the shape of the chain, the expression in her eyes, gentle but distant, like someone trained to hide her truth. Suddenly, the image doesn't feel peaceful anymore. It feels haunted. Beneath the frame, a simple plaque reads, "Montgomery Plantation, 1853, Caroline Montgomery and her companion Harriet." But it's the next line that stops people cold. Reclassified, enslaved child, age 14, forced companion. Subject of psychological captivity. The silence that fills the gallery is heavy, the kind that demands reflection. To the left of the photograph, a glass display case holds an object most visitors cannot look at for long. A replica of Harriet's gold shackle. It gleams softly under the lights, Thin, intricate, and deceptively beautiful. A master craftsman had recreated it from archival sketches and metallurgical analysis, ensuring that every swirl of gold filigree matched the original. It looks fragile, delicate, almost like jewelry. But as you read the inscription beside it, the truth cuts through the beauty. Forged restraint. Designed for concealment. Used to enforce obedience under the guise of elegance. Inside the same case, folded neatly beside the replica, lies a yellowed page, a copy of Harriet's 1930s testimony, her words preserved in looping handwriting. I was told to smile, so I smiled. But the chain smiled too. That one sentence, fragile yet devastating, has become the emotional center of the entire exhibition. It captures everything: the performance of grace, the theft of childhood, and the defiant endurance of a girl forced to act out her captor's vision of humanity. Visitors read it aloud in hushed voices. Some whisper, "The chain smiled too," as if repeating a sacred line. Others simply stand there motionless, their reflection merging with the glass, as though they too are caught inside history's frame. The exhibition is divided into two halves. One side shows portraits like the Montgomery photograph, the public face of slavery, refined and posed. The other reveals what those images hid: restraint devices, letters and diary entries that speak of control masked as compassion. It's a gallery of contradictions: beauty that hides pain, kindness that conceals cruelty, elegance that decorates enslavement. Dr. Michael Hayes, who curated the exhibition, described it as a confrontation with the polite lies of history. He explained in an interview, "We were taught to see the plantation South as a place of civility and refinement. But civility without humanity is just cruelty in costume. These photographs weren't just family keepsakes. They were propaganda, and Harriet's image once used to display grace now displays the truth." Each visitor's experience is deeply personal. Some weep quietly, others stare in disbelief, a few steps closer, almost involuntarily, as if needing to apologize to the child in the frame. At the far end of the exhibit, a projection screen plays fragments of interviews from descendants of enslaved companions, stories passed down through families for generations, but never documented until now. One woman, a schoolteacher from Atlanta, says, "My great-great-grandmother used to say, they dressed us like dolls, but we were never free to move." The room ends with a wall of mirrors. On them, in faint lettering, Harriet's final quote glows under soft golden light. "They took my picture to remember their kindness. Now they can look again and see the truth." It's a message to everyone standing there, their reflections mingling with hers. A reminder that history is not distant, that truth demands witness. For Dr. Hayes, the exhibition became more than historical preservation. It became an act of moral restoration. He often says that Harriet's courage rewrote the photograph's meaning, transforming it from an artifact of oppression into a monument of survival. What once symbolized ownership now stands for endurance. What once disguised cruelty now exposes it. And what once showed two girls pretending friendship now tells the story of a child's quiet rebellion against a world that tried to erase her. Today, Harriet's face looks out not from a plantation parlor, but from the halls of one of the world's most respected museums, seen by thousands, studied by scholars, remembered by strangers who whisper her name with reverence. Every visitor who walks away from that photograph carries a fragment of her story, and an uncomfortable realization that oppression often hides not in brutality, but in beauty, that history's cruelty sometimes wears lace and pearls. As the exhibition's final inscription reads, etched in brass at the exit, "The truest strength does not belong to those who held the chains, but to those who survived them." And in that truth, Harriet's story finally finds its justice, not through vengeance, but through remembrance. Because now, when the world looks at that photograph again, it doesn't see elegance. It sees endurance. It sees her. Some histories don't vanish. They simply change their disguise. They wait, buried beneath dust, framed behind glass, or frozen in a smile that never belonged to the person wearing it. Harriet's story isn't just about the past. It's about every truth that was silenced, every voice that was forced to whisper, and every photograph that dared to hide its pain behind beauty. Because every image carries a heartbeat, every shadow tells a story. And sometimes, the past isn't gone. It's just waiting for someone brave enough to listen. So look closer. Look beyond the lace, the luxury, the illusion. If you believe every photograph holds more than what the eye can see, then you're exactly where you need to be. Click the related video to uncover the next hidden truth. And before you go, don't forget to subscribe so the voices of the past never fade again and the stories buried in silence can finally be heard.